Hello, everyone. Welcome to We Need Our Space Live and a very special Harry Potter edition of the show. I'm going to be doing some astronomy of Harry Potter. I'm going to be covering some of the characters in the series, and going over how they got their names and how their names are connected to certain astronomical objects and places, and how the ancient myths that those names are based on play a part in the backstory of the Harry Potter series characters. So as I begin, I'm going to take myself out of here. Don't need me anymore. And let's get right into it. I'm going to do a brief recap here. If you've never read the Harry Potter series, let me tell you a little bit about what the Harry Potter series is about. Well, if you are unfamiliar with the Harry Potter series, it is basically a series of fantasy novels written by British author J.K. Rowling. The novels chronicle the lives of a young wizard, Harry Potter, and his friends, Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley, all of whom are students at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The main story arc concerns Harry's struggles against Lord Voldemort, a dark wizard who intends to become immortal, overthrow the wizarding governing body known as the Ministry of Magic, and subjugate all wizards and muggles. Muggles are the non-magical people like myself. Well, those are the main characters, just a few of many, but there are... There we go. There's a huge cast of characters in the Harry Potter series that surround these main characters. Now, some of them are in league with Harry, and some of them are in league with Voldemort. And when you read through this series, you will come across many colorful character names like Fleur Delacour, Argus Filch, Sirius Black, Draco Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle. You can go on and on and on naming these characters. Now, what's interesting about these names is that they can give the reader an instant idea into the character. You've got a name like Millicent Bulstrode. Now that name Millicent sounds kind of like militant. You've got Salazar Slytherin, and it sounds like the slither of a snake. So it's an interesting literary device that will clue the reader into what kind of character they're reading about without having to do a whole lot of backstory on those characters. You kind of instantly know what you're dealing with when you come across those names. But there are other characters in the Harry Potter series that have their names based on astronomical themes, places, and objects. And that is what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some of the characters in the Harry Potter series and look at how they're connected to not only astronomy, but the ancient myths, legends, and beliefs that the astronomical terms are based on. We're going to see just how in-depth J.K. Rowling went to flesh out her own characters based on these ancient astronomical ties. So we're not only going to learn about astronomy today, but we're also going to learn about the creative writing process as well. So to begin with, let's start off with a little bit of trivia to see how well you know the series. So trivia time. Who was the first student Harry ran across before his trip to Hogwarts? Now this is in connection with the books, not the movies. So if you've read the books, think back before Harry got on the train, when he was buying his first wand, his owl that he got, the robes, whenever he took a trip to Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. Well, if you said Draco Malfoy, then you are correct. Draco Malfoy was probably, I think, the very first student that Harry ever ran across. Well, Draco Malfoy gets his name from the constellation Draco the Dragon. Let's take a look at where Draco the Dragon is at in our sky. Here we are. There is Draco the Dragon. The head of the dragon right there, the body and the tail of Draco the Dragon. Now, according to the legend, the dragon often had run-ins with Minerva, the Roman equivalent to the goddess of wit, intelligence, crafts, and magic. These two would often fight until one day Minerva had had enough of Draco. She grabbed him by the tail, spun him around, and tossed him into the sky, where he remains to this day. Now, I mentioned Minerva because you might recall Professor Minerva Mcgonagall. Well, not only in the ancient Greek myth did Minerva and Draco fight, but in the Harry Potter series, Draco and Professor McGonagall also had several run-ins as well. So now this constellation can be seen in the sky, winding serpent-like between the two bears. You have Ursa Major and you have Ursa Minor. So Draco, the dragon, the constellation, his tail goes in between Ursa Major, the great bear, Ursa Minor, the lesser bear. And in Ursa Major, you can find that asterism known as the Big Dipper. Well, this is appropriate because in the Harry Potter series, Draco Malfoy can always be seen with these two larger characters, Crabbe and Goyle. They're always at his left and right side. These are his cronies, Crabbe and Goyle. Well, again, not only does Draco Malfoy have the two large cronies in Crabbe and Goyle, but also in the nighttime sky, you've got Draco always accompanied in between, to his left and to his right, the two large bears, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Now, since we're on the topic of Draco, just below this constellation, Draco, you can find something else, a constellation that goes by the name of Scorpius. Pull this down just a tad, and there you can see Draco the Dragon, and just below them, on the southern horizon, you will find Scorpius the Scorpion. Well, this might sound familiar to you because Scorpius was the actual son of Draco Malfoy, Scorpius Malfoy. So it was after Draco and Harry and everyone else had graduated from Hogwarts, Draco found a woman that could stand to be around him, and then they got married, and then they had a son by the name of Scorpius. Well, Scorpius actually plays a very pivotal role in the most recent play/book, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Now, in the book, Scorpius and Albus, which is Harry's son, they were tasked to bring someone back to Delphi Diggory. Well, if you look a bit more towards the east of Scorpius, you will find yet another constellation known as Delphinus the Dolphin. So let's find exactly where Delphinus is at. Come on, type in. There is Delphinus. You will find Draco, Scorpius, and in between those two is this small constellation known as Delphinus the Dolphin. Well, you'll notice how Delphi Diggory's hair is silver, just like a dolphin's skin. Now, as it turns out, Delphi gets her name from this constellation here. And this constellation is based on an ancient Greek myth as well. Now, in this myth, the dolphin is tasked by Poseidon, the god of the sea, to seek out and find someone that Poseidon had been searching for. So Delphinus had to go out and find this particular person and then persuade her to come back to Poseidon. Also, in the Harry Potter series, Delphi had tasked Albus and Scorpius to go off, find someone, and bring them back to her as well. Well, trivia time again. What time? Let's see here. What time is it? All right. Trivia time. What character in the Harry Potter series is named after our closest neighboring celestial body? I do have a hint here on the screen for you. Now, this character is known for her odd and quirky behavior. It's one of my favorite characters in the Harry Potter series. Now, if you named Luna Lovegood, then you have hit the nail on the head. Luna Lovegood, named after our moon. So Luna is next up on our list of characters with names associated with astronomy. Luna actually gets her name from the moon. In fact, Luna is actually Latin for moon. Let's go take a look at the moon right now, up close. Some actual details here. Here we are at the moon. You'll see Earth. Let's pull in to the moon. Actual surface details of this. Let's kind of speed up time here as I talk about the moon. As I talk about the moon, we can see this nice detail of the surface of the moon. Well, the character's name, Luna Lovegood, It's also a play on the connection people used to make between the moon and lunacy. It was once believed by the Greek philosopher Aristotle that the brain was the moistest organ in the body, and because of this, it was susceptible to the full moon's influence, just like the tides. He believed that whenever the full moon was out, it would literally tug on our brains, causing many people to turn into lunatics. Case in point. The moon turning people into lunatics. That is where we get the word lunacy and lunatics. That's where those words come from. This is why Luna Lovegood is such a odd and quirky character. It should be noted that there is another character by the name of Moon that gets a very brief mention in this series as well. When it comes to characters in the Harry Potter series with names associated with astronomy, there's no better family to look at than the Blacks and the Black family tree. The most notable, the most famous member that we all know of would be Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, Sirius Black. I'm drinking my coffee here. Well, Sirius Black gets his name from the brightest star in the nighttime sky, which is Sirius. Let me pull this up to show you exactly where Sirius is at. We will be visiting this area of the sky again. There is Sirius, highlighted right there in the constellation Canis Major, the Great Dog, one of Orion's 2 hunting hounds. Let's take a different look here as I pull away from the moon, because we are going to be visiting Sirius up close in 1 second. There is Sirius the star that Sirius Black gets his name from. There's Canis Major. Let me take this down here. So there you go. There is where Sirius is at. Now, let's actually go out and visit Sirius up close. As we go out to Sirius, the star Sirius, let's talk a little bit about the star and also the constellation that you can find it in. Again, the star can be found within the constellation Canis Major, the Great Dog. Now, Canis Major is one of 2 hunting hounds of the constellation Orion the Hunter. Now, remember that name because Orion is another character in the Harry Potter series. Now, this is why Sirius is known as the Dog Star, because it is the brightest star in the constellation the Great Dog, Canis Major. Now, as a side note, you might be familiar with the term or the word Sirius. It is also the name of Sirius Satellite Radio. You can see the logo there of the little dog with a star in his eye for Sirius Satellite Radio. Again, that is why it is known as the Dog Star. And speaking of Dog Star, this is the name of Keanu Reeves' band. Do you know what instrument Keanu Reeves played in his band Dog Star? That would be bass. He played the bass. Where are we at? Let's go over to Sirius again here. Okay, so I'll say all this because Sirius Black in the Harry Potter series is known as an animagus. He can turn himself into a dog. Now, it's because of this that his friends nicknamed him Padfoot. Now, why Padfoot? Well, Padfoot was a name that North Englanders gave to these ghostly, spectral dogs that were said to guard graveyards. Now, being from this area, J.K. Rowling probably took that folklore to name Sirius Black, to nickname Sirius Black. So, we just visited up close Sirius. Now let's take a look at this, because as we approach, you probably notice something. You notice this very bright star there, and then you notice this other star right there. That is called the Pup, because actually Sirius is not just one star. It is a binary star system. There are 2 stars in this system, gravitationally attracted to each other, Sirius A and Sirius B. So for fun, let's speed up time and see how they orbit each other here. Here we go. Sirius A and Sirius B orbiting each other in a binary star system. With that fun out of the way, let me slow down time just a tad so we can visit Sirius A up close, because it is very different than our own star, the Sun. Now, Sirius A, the one that we're going to right now, this is 8.6 light years away from us, and we can, as we get closer to it, we are seeing that it is a whitish, a bluish whitish star. It's very, very large star. There we go. Okay, pull away. There we go. That looks good. Now, if you replaced Sirius with our sun, if you replaced our sun with Sirius, what would happen? Well, the life on our planet would be burned away within about an hour. The upper layers of the ocean would be boiling as well. And the only life that would be probably still around would be the creatures that could sort of live far underneath the very lower depths of the ocean. So this star is actually 10 times larger than our own star, the Sun, and it is twice as massive. So let's go ahead and move away from Sirius. Go back to planet Earth there. There we go. With temperatures that we are familiar with. Well, another member of the family Black that is very popular would be RAB. This was a bit of a mystery once one of the books ended. If you remember in the books, they're trying to find the Horcruxes that Lord Voldemort had hidden parts of his soul in. As it turned out, RAB was trying to do that before Harry and Dumbledore were doing it, and RAB was unsuccessful, but they didn't quite know who exactly RAB, who that stood for, and then when the next book came out, they revealed that it was in fact Regulus Arcturus Black. So let's talk a little bit about Regulus Arcturus Black. He has two names associated with astronomy. Actually, Regulus and Arcturus are the names of two stars that we can find. So just to kind of reiterate here as I go into this other program here. So our Regulus Arcturus Black attempted to hunt down and destroy one of the Horcruxes of Lord Voldemort. I'll go over the Horcruxes in 1 second. Let's find Regulus first. Go. It is in Leo the Lion. That bright star right there. The brightest star in Leo the Lion. Well, Voldemort had divided his soul into pieces and hid them away in certain items to protect himself from dying. Now, if you destroyed these Horcruxes, if you destroyed all of them, you would destroy all the pieces of Lord Voldemort's soul, and then you would have a better chance at actually defeating Voldemort. Well, one of these items was the locket, and Regulus Arcturus Black tried to destroy it, but he was very unsuccessful. Well, again, let's go over here. So Regulus, this is his first name, named after a star in Leo the Lion. Regulus, the star, actually means little king. It also means the heart of the lion, which is synonymous with bravery. So even though Regulus Black wasn't successful in destroying the locket, it was still a very brave attempt. He did this on his own. Even though it was unsuccessful, still a very brave attempt. You have to give him credit where credit is due. Now, his middle name there, Arcturus, that is the brightest star in the constellation Boötes the Herdsman. Boötes the Herdsman, a very strange name, known as the Watcher of the Bears. The Polaris star right there, that is the North Star. So as the Earth appears to spin, it will appear that Boötes is chasing the bears around the pole star. Anyways, so Arcturus is the brightest star in Boötes. Now, Arcturus was known as a sign of bad weather to come. And if you looked over to the movies, whenever Harry and Dumbledore went to the seaside cliff cave in the path of Regulus Arcturus Black to find the locket that he was also looking for, they were also met with very bad weather indeed. Now, also, the names Regulus and Arcturus, those are also two other individual characters that are briefly mentioned in this series, but kind of in an earlier generation, but just kind of mentioned in passing there. Now, continuing down the family tree, there's also someone named Andromeda Black Tonks. Andromeda Black Tonks gets her name from the constellation Andromeda. Now, in the ancient Greek myth, now you may be familiar with this because there's a movie called Clash of the Titans. They kind of recounted this myth that I'm about to tell here, but Andromeda was the daughter of Queen Cassiopeia, and she was marked for death by Poseidon, the god of the sea. Now, before this could happen, she was saved by the hero Perseus as he rode in on the back of Pegasus, the winged horse. And as he came in on Pegasus, the winged horse, he had the head of Medusa. He took out the head of Medusa. As Cetus, the sea monster, was coming out of the ocean, he revealed the head of Medusa. The glare of Medusa could change anything, to turn anything into stone. Cetus the sea monster saw the head of Medusa, turned himself into stone, crumbled and cracked and crashed into the ocean. Perseus saved the day. Not only did he save the entire land from being ravaged by Cetus the sea monster, but also Andromeda. And then they would fall in love, get married, and then Andromeda's mother and father would eventually sort of disown her as well because they thought that she married sort of beneath her class, apparently. Now, this is significant because in the Harry Potter series, Andromeda Black Tonks was disowned from her family because she married the Muggle-born Ted Tonks. So both the Andromedas had been disowned from their families. Now, not only is Andromeda a constellation, it is also the name of the closest major galaxy to us, the Andromeda Galaxy. Let's go visit the Andromeda Galaxy to see what that looks like. Well, our galaxy, the Milky Way, has around an estimated number of around 100 to 400 billion stars. The Andromeda Galaxy right here has around 1 trillion stars, 2 million light years away. If you have a very dark night away from any city lights and street lights, if you looked over to Andromeda, you can see a smudge of light to the corner of Andromeda. If you see that, you are seeing the Andromeda Galaxy. And the light from that point in the sky is traveling to your eyes some 2 million years. The furthest object that we can see in our nighttime sky with our bare naked eye. It is said in some 4 billion years from now, our galaxy, the Milky Way, and the Andromeda Galaxy will collide to form a super galaxy. Now, this might sound horrible and catastrophic, but actually the space between the stars is so great that if we are still around in some 4 billion years, we might not notice anything is happening at all. Now, in the ancient Greek myth, Queen Cassiopeia is the mother of Andromeda. King Cepheus is her father. Right there, you'll see those two. But in the Harry Potter series, Cassiopeia is a character in the Harry Potter series, but not the mother of Andromeda Black Tonks. Just get that out of the way. Now, there are other characters you can find in your nighttime sky that have names associated with the Harry Potter series. Let's go over them really quick here. We've got Pollux Black. Not a lot of just known about him. Pollux, one of 2 stars in the Gemini, the twins. You've got Cygnus Black. There it is, Cygnus, the constellation Cygnus, known as the Swan. You have Orion Black, the patriarch of the family. There is Orion right there. And then finally, you've got Uncle Alphard Black and Hydra the water snake. So let's go over a couple of them real quick. And they were mentioned by Sirius at one point during, I believe it was Order of the Phoenix. Who did we bring up first? Pollux. Well, Pollux, not a lot is known of the character of Pollux, but Pollux in Gemini, the twins. 2 stars are very bright in this constellation. You got Pollux and you've got Castor. So there's Castor right there. Now, if you've ever read the Hunger Games, you will come across a set of twins in the Hunger Games a little bit later on in the series named Castor and Pollux. Both twins, both named after the stars found in the constellation Gemini, the twins. Now, the name Pollux actually means very sweet or good wine. So, not a lot is known about Pollux the character, but it could be he is a bit of a lush in the family. Don't quite know. But aside from that, we don't know a lot about him, so let's go visit Cygnus the Swan, because this is kind of interesting about Cygnus. Also known as the Northern Cross. It's better known as the Swan, however. In the series, there are 3 Cygnus Blacks that span several generations. You've got Cygnus Jr., and you have Cygnus the Third. Now, in the ancient Greek myth, there were 3 swans mentioned as well. 3 gods were able to transform themselves as if they too were animagi into swans to trick people from who they were really. Now, 3 swans in the ancient Greek myth that their names in the Harry Potter series were based on, and 3 characters in that series spanning several generations. Now, was this intentional or was this just coincidence? Don't quite know. But after all, there were several characters who share their names. There were several Arcturuses, there were several Siriuses as well in the family tree. Now, It may be intentional. I think it would be very interesting to see if J.K. Rowling found that there were 3 gods able to transform themselves into swans, and these swans kind of were the basis of Cygnus the Swan in the nighttime sky. And then she had a character named Cygnus and went ahead and wrote in that there were an additional 2 Cygnus characters in the family tree. So 3 swans in the Black family tree, 3 swans in the ancient Greek myth as well. I hope that is true, that she looked all that stuff up and incorporated that into her backstory. Well, there's also Orion Black. Again, I've mentioned Orion several times, and as we get closer, if you look at the individual stars in Orion, you might notice another character in there that I'm circling right there. But for the time being, Orion Black was the patriarch of the family. And Orion, the constellation, can always be seen with his 2 hunting hounds. You have Canis Major, and then you have Canis Minor. Canis Minor is just 2 stars. You've got Procyon, the brightest of the 2 stars, in Canis Minor, the 2 hunting hounds of Orion. Now remember, you can find Sirius as the brightest star, not only in our nighttime sky, but it's also the brightest star in Canis Major. Canis Major is the greatest of the Orion's hunting hounds. Also, in the Harry Potter series, Sirius was the eldest son of Orion. Now we'll come back to Orion in just a second, because I just circled one of those stars there that has a very familiar name, so we'll come back to that in just one moment. But for the time being, let's look at Uncle Alphard over here. Uncle Alphard, which we can see in Hydra the water snake. Well, Alphard is the brightest star in Hydra, the longest constellation that you can find along the southern horizon of the nighttime sky. Well, you'll notice that snakes, basilisks, serpents, they all play a very vital role, not only in the Harry Potter series, but particularly in the Black family tree, since so many of them belong to House Slytherin at Hogwarts. You've got Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, you've got Hufflepuff, and you have Slytherin. They all had their own mascots, and House Slytherin had the snake as a mascot. Well, Uncle Alphard takes his name from the star Alphard, the brightest star in Hydra the water snake. Now, the name Alphard is Arabic, and it means the solitary one. Most of these constellations derive their names from the ancient Greek myths, but most stars get their names from an Arabic origin. In this case, Alphard is solitary, and the character in the Harry Potter series was disowned from his family, cast out for financially supporting Sirius after he had run away from home. And finally, let's go back to Orion, because we have Bellatrix right there. Bellatrix, the star that you can find as one of the shoulder stars in Orion. Now, the story of Bellatrix Black Lestrange is interesting because of how it is connected to this star named Bellatrix. So Bellatrix Lestrange, her full name Bellatrix Black Lestrange, gets her name from the star Bellatrix. Actually, if you took the name Bellatrix, it actually literally translates to female warrior. Bella and Trix, female warrior. So let's go visit Bellatrix up close. Put my coffee cup down for a second. Let's go back to Earth to find it in relation to our planet. Bellatrix, the star. And do you remember the constellation it's in? Orion, and there it is. Oops. Let's kind of change our orientation here to see it a little bit. There we go. There it is. So there is Bellatrix the star. Let's go visit Bellatrix. Yes, on our way to Bellatrix right now. So this is 250 light years away from us. We are traveling faster than the speed of light to get there. It's 20 million years old and is 8.4 times the mass of our own sun. Now, astronomers have looked at this star to see if it has any neighboring companions, but as far as we can tell, they have found none. All alone. Lonely Bellatrix. There it is, a better look. All by itself. If it had a companion star, you'd see a companion star there, but Bellatrix is all by itself. So lonely. Oh, poor Bellatrix. Now again, the name Bellatrix means female warrior. And as you recall, Bellatrix Lestrange was one of Lord Voldemort's most faithful warriors. Now, speaking of he who must not be named, let's take a trip to a little place called the Pleiades. Well, before he was known as Lord Voldemort, he was a boy by the name of Tom Riddle. And every great villain has to start somewhere. Well, for Lord Voldemort, he used to be known as Tom Marvolo Riddle. In fact, that's how he got the name Voldemort. If you switch around the letters in Tom Marvolo Riddle, you've got I am Lord Voldemort. Now, that being said, Tom Riddle had a mother, and her name was Merope. And Merope Gaunt can also be found in our nighttime sky and in this location here. This is what is called the Pleiades Open Star Cluster. It's also called the Pleiades Reflection Nebula, but I'll get into that in 1 second. Now, one of these stars is known as Merope. Now, originally, whenever people looked at this object in the sky from where they were at, in fact, let me bring up this program here to show you. Okay, so here we are looking at Taurus the Bull. See that right there I'm circling? That is the Pleiades. Now, whenever you look at that right there, that little cluster of stars, it looks almost like a small version of the Little Dipper. A little cup right there. Well, whenever the ancient people, in fact, I will circle that right there. There we go. So as we get closer to it, we are seeing, and there's Merope. So whenever the ancient people looked at this section of the sky, they saw 7 stars. This is why the Pleiades is known as the 7 sisters, the 7 daughters of Atlas. Let's go back to where we were just at, and this looks nice and prettier. Okay, so let's go over the myth that this section of the sky, this name here, is associated with. So this cluster of stars is sometimes referred to as the 7 sisters, and it lies within the constellation, just a little bit off the constellation of Taurus the Bull. Now, as the legend goes, the 7 sisters of Atlas thought they were the most beautiful women in all the world, and this hubris, this arrogance, angered the gods, and they plucked them from Earth and they placed them into the sky, where they remain to this day. Well, one of these sisters was known as Merope, and Merope had used magic to trick a mortal man into falling in love with her. Now, whenever this was found out, she hid herself in shame behind her sisters. And this is why Merope, the star, is one of the faintest stars in the 7 sisters of the Pleiades. They thought that she was hiding herself behind her sisters. Well, in the Harry Potter series, Merope Gaunt had tricked a Muggle man into marrying her as well. She used a love potion to do this. Now, this love potion eventually wore off, and this Muggle-born man came to his senses, and he left her, and actually he had fathered a son by this time with her, so he had left her and Tom Riddle as well. Now, after it had become known that Merope had put a spell on this poor man, she had to hide herself away from society. She was ashamed of herself. She was embarrassed by what she had done. Now, whenever you look at the Pleiades, open cluster of stars, here we go. Let's find Merope real quick. Single Merope out. There it is, right there. Let's go up to it and see it up close. Well, whenever you look at the Pleiades open star cluster, you can see that it is not just 7 stars. Optics have improved since the old days of looking at it with your naked eye. It's actually thousands of stars. In this cluster, thousands of stars. But the stars in this cluster are not hot enough to ionize the gas that surrounds them. What we're seeing here is a chance encounter between a passing... Let me back away just a bit here. I see this gas. There we go. All this gas here. Okay. Take that away. Here we go. So what we're seeing here is a chance encounter between a passing interstellar dust cloud that passes through the Pleiades open cluster. Now, this is why it's called the Pleiades Reflection Nebula. So it's not only called a reflection nebula, but it's also called the Pleiades open star cluster. So just to get those 2 things out of the way there. Now, this is some 444 light years away from Earth. But let's go closer to home, because we're going to find something. Oops, there's Merope again, feeling sorry for itself. Well, we're going to cover something called the Centaurs. So the Pleiades was some 444 light years away. Closer to home, we have something called the Centaurs. Now, you might have heard of Centaurs before, but did you know that we have Centaurs in our own solar system? Well, the Centaurs in outer space are these trans-Neptunian objects that pass or have passed the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. They are half comet and they are half asteroid. Now, in the Harry Potter series, the Centaurs might sound familiar to you because in the Greek myth, the Centaurs were these half-man, half-horse creatures. In the Harry Potter series, they sort of lived out in the Forbidden Forest, and they would typically divine the future and the stars. Well, we also have some Centaurs out here in space. Half asteroid, half comets. That's why they have this name, Centaurs, because they're not quite one and they're not quite the other. One of these objects was so large it actually got its own name. So let's go visit that up close because it is called Amicus. And Amicus shares its name with a character in the Harry Potter series, and it gets its name from an old Greek myth. Amicus was the son of Poseidon, and he fought in the First and Second Trojan Wars. So in the Harry Potter series, you have another character named Amicus Caro. Now, he was not a centaur, but that's where he gets his name, from Amicus, in the old Greek myth, the same person that this object is named after. Let's orbit around here and see this centaur. So no, Amicus Caro was a follower of Voldemort. He fought in the First and Second Wizarding Wars. The Amicus in the Greek myth fought in the First and Second Trojan Wars. Both of the characters were not centaurs, though. But we do have some centaurs in our solar system. Now, let's head home real quick. We're going to cover something else. Because stars and constellation names aren't the only sources that J.K. Rowling used for the characters in the Harry Potter series. Now, one of the characters in the Rowling's books is actually based on a real person. So here's a bit of a trivia time for you. Who was a real person, a real scholar, mentioned when Ron was talking about the one collectible card he was missing from the Chocolate Frog's deck? Now, this was not in the movie. This was mentioned in the book. He actually mentioned 2 cards he was missing. Harry said he had gotten a Dumbledore card. Ron said he had about 6 of those cards, but the one card he was missing was Ptolemy. Ptolemy gets a brief mention in the series. He's a famous astronomer. Now, in astronomical history, Ptolemy was a Greek scholar, and he devised the Ptolemaic system for the Earth-centered cosmos. And Ptolemy believed that the Earth was one sphere inside another sphere, inside yet another sphere, and he loved spheres. Now, he was incorrect about this, but he did get the ball rolling when it came to categorizing and cataloging comets and celestial objects. Now, you may remember him being mentioned because Ptolemy was one of the cards that Ron was missing from that collectible set of chocolate card frogs. They only have one good jump in them. Again, he had about 6 of those Dumbledore cards, was missing Ptolemy. Well, maybe he eventually found it. The ever-elusive Ptolemy card. Well, that being said, Ptolemy would be one character taught at Hogwarts as part of the astronomy course. So, your next trivia question here real quick while I get another sip of coffee. Who taught astronomy at Hogwarts? That's your trivia question right now. What was the name of the astronomy teacher at Hogwarts who had 2 names associated with astronomy? That would be Aurora Sinistra. Yes, her first name, Aurora, is not astronomically themed, but it is an atmospheric phenomenon. It's based on the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. Let's take a look at those Northern Lights. Have you ever heard of the Northern Lights? Very beautiful display as it loads up here. Seen more towards the poles of Earth. Also around Sweden and Norway, you can see these Northern Lights, these green, pinkish, bluish lights. I'm going to speed up time a little bit here so we can see those lights twinkling. There we go. I'll pull away a bit so we can see all those. Go. See those Northern Lights there. Well, what are these Northern Lights? Well, these lights normally are seen in the higher latitudes, and they are caused by cosmic rays, solar wind, and magnetospheric plasma interacting with the upper atmosphere. Now, the charged particles from the sun enter Earth's atmosphere from above, and this causes ionization and excitation of atmospheric particles. Now, this produces a dazzling display, red, green, yellows, and blues. So her name, Aurora Sinistra, that suggests that she is a person of the light. Now, however, her last name, Sinistra, sounds almost sinister. Well, the name Sinistra actually comes from a star name that can be found in the hands of a constellation known as Ophiuchus. Let's go over back to here. Let's find that constellation known as Ophiuchus. There is Ophiuchus. Now you've got, it's kind of hard to see. So there is Ophiuchus the serpent bearer. Now I want to point out that Aurora Sinistra married into the Sinistra family. Her maiden name was Aurora Lowe. How do I know that? I did a lot of research. So the name Sinistra comes from a star in Ophiuchus. Let me look up this star real quick to point out where it's at. I'm going to put in its actual name. Let's see here. What is it again? Yep. Did I point out? No. There it is. So that is Sinistra, also known as New Ophiuchi. Well, again, this is also known as Sinistra. Now, if you translated Sinistra from the Latin, it actually means left hand. And it resides in the constellation known as the Serpent Bearer. Again, you've got serpents and snakes making their appearances in the Harry Potter series. Well, as we look at Ophiuchus here, we can see that it appears in his right hand. He's facing us. Now, it could be that the ancients saw this constellation, this character with his back to us, since the name Sinistra actually translates to left hand. Now, the reason why I'm beating this over and over again is because if you look at the Harry Potter movie, the very first movie, you will see that Dumbledore is sitting in the dining room hall, and to his left is always the astronomy teacher, Aurora Sinistra, with her last name meaning left hand. Isn't that interesting? Now, is that on purpose? Not quite sure, but it is an interesting detail if they indeed followed up with the backstory of how her last name actually means left hand. Always at Dumbledore's left hand. So now I want to briefly touch on two of Harry's most trusted friends. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on them because I'm really having to sort of stretch this concept here of what we're kind of going with by including them, but I do think that I should mention them nonetheless because they are very loosely connected to astronomy. It also gives us an opportunity to look at something different. So I have not mentioned them yet, but I want to talk a little bit about Hermione Granger and Ginny Weasley, whose full name is Molly Ginevra Ginny Weasley. Now, these two characters, Hermione and Ginny, also share their names with two asteroids that we can find in our asteroid belt. Hermione 121 and 613 Ginevra. Let's take a look at one of these right here. Go visit Hermione up close. Now, this is interesting because the name Hermione can be translated from the Greek meaning stone. Also, it can be translated into meaning well-born. Now, the reason why I mentioned that is because Draco Malfoy was always making fun of Hermione for being muggle-born. So her name kind of contradicts what Draco is always poking fun at. Here we are at Hermione. Speed up time just a little bit here. See it rotating around. Okay, so both of these asteroids orbit the sun amongst the millions of other asteroids orbiting the sun. There's an estimated number of around 2 million asteroids orbiting our solar system. Some of these are as large as 600 miles across, and some of these are just a few feet across. Now, like I said, I'm kind of stretching the concept here, but I wanted to bring up the asteroids because there is another asteroid closer to home, closer to Earth, that is large enough to have its own moon and also its own name. So do you remember a character by the name of Remus Lupin? The one-time professor of the care for magical creatures. Well, he shares his name with a moon of an asteroid 67 Sylvia. which lies in the main belt of the asteroids. Now, according to the Roman myth, Remus and Romulus were twin boys raised by wolves. Accordingly, Remus Lupin happens to be a werewolf, whose last name, Lupin, is derived from the Latin word lupus, meaning wolf. Now, this is the moon of... Where is it at? There's Remus. Where is... There he is. Thought you'd get away from me. There we go. There's 67 Sylvia right there. And there is Remus. Okay. Now, as a passing note there, you might remember during Potter Watch, when they were trying to get Harry out of the house safely to the Weasleys, Remus Lupin took on the nickname or the code name Romulus. Now, I wanted to bring this up also because Remus isn't the only werewolf we can find in our nighttime sky. So I want to journey out to the ringed planet Saturn to find another werewolf that we can find. It is a minor moon, a very dark moon of Saturn. And as I type it in here, you might know what I'm going with. Fenrir. Do you remember Fenrir Greyback? Well, Fenrir Greyback takes his name from the ancient Roman myth that this dwarf moon takes its name as well. As we approach Fenrir, come on now, where you at? Whoosh. There we go. Let's back away from Fenrir. Dial down the exposure just a tad there. There we go. Not exactly moon-shaped. This is why it is known as a dwarf moon. Well, Fenrir is one of the faintest and smallest moons to orbit Saturn. Now, it's named after a giant wolf in the Norse mythology, Fenrir. Now, in the myth, Fenrir, the great wolf, had grown so large that he actually began to scare the gods. They attempted to bind him once unsuccessfully, and they tried a second time, and again they failed. It was on the third attempt that they finally were able to bind Fenrir. Now, Fenrir the werewolf in the Harry Potter series fought in the First and Second Wizarding Wars, and it is believed that it was after the war at Hogwarts that he was finally captured and bound in Azkaban prison. Now, as we were passing by Saturn, we also passed by a constellation known as Carina. And in Carina, there is an old constellation known as Argos, which can now be found in the keel of Carina. This is Carina right here. So there's an old constellation in that called Argos. Argos will sound familiar to you because it is the constellation that Argus Filch takes his name. Now, Argus, the constellation, is based on the ancient Greek myth. Argus was a creature said to guard the halls of Hera. Now, it's sometimes regarded as a sort of a strange-looking creature with many eyes. In fact, Argus actually translates to one with many eyes. But sometimes it can be seen as a peacock. And if you look at the feathers of a peacock, here is a depiction of Argus. The feathers of the peacock have these little eye-looking designs in them within the feathers. Well, that is another depiction of Argus, one with many eyes. Now, this is significant because not only did Argus have many eyes and was always patrolling the halls of Hera, but Argus Filch in the Harry Potter series was also constantly patrolling and keeping an eye out for mischievous students in the halls of Hogwarts, oftentimes after bedtime. So let's wrap things up with something a little bit on a lighter note. Let's wrap things up with Harry Potter's probably his greatest champion, Albus Dumbledore. Well, there is a white dwarf star candidate known as Albus I out in space. Now, we've seen several stars here. We've seen Bellatrix, a bluish white star. We've seen some orangish, reddish stars. Our own star, the sun, is a yellowish star. Well, Albus I is a white dwarf star. Now, I don't have this particular star in any of my databases, so this is kind of a junky picture here, but this is a picture. The center star is Albus I. Now, I say this because, in fact, the name Albus can be translated to the word white, this is an essential component to alchemy. And alchemy is the study of transfiguring one object into another, particularly turning lead into gold. Well, a white dwarf star is what happens when a star like our sun has consumed the hydrogen in its core, the hydrogen around its core, then it begins consuming the helium, and when it exhausts that, it puffs out its outer layers out into space and then collapses into a super compressed star about the size of Earth, but it retains the mass of the original star. So, one way to think about a white dwarf star is that they are these super compressed burning balls of carbon. So they're actually these massive, huge burning diamonds in space. As we look at Albus 1, and this could be a depiction of Albus 1 here, we can find something else in a nighttime sky called the Phoenix constellation. Now, white dwarf stars are these dim reminders of stars that were once main sequence stars. And they dot the galaxies all over the place. So we can see all these white dwarf stars around this Phoenix constellation. So it's nice to kind of see Albus and the Phoenix together in the sky, because Albus Dumbledore had a phoenix for a pet. Now again, a phoenix is a mythological creature said to be reborn from the ashes of its own death. So here in the sky, we can finally see the Phoenix yet again, as well as Albus, the Phoenix and Albus together again in space. And with that, I'm going to conclude the show. We've covered quite a bit today. Go back to planet Earth here. That's where I live. So, that is the conclusion of We Need Our Space, this special, very special Harry Potter episode. We've examined some of the many characters in the Harry Potter universe and how they share their namesake, the origins with real astronomical themes and objects. Bring myself up here real quick to say a fond adieu to you. So I hope you learned not only quite a bit about astronomy, but gained some insight into the creative writing process as well. So join me again next week. I will have another show for you, perhaps on Star Wars. There's maybe something else. So again, I'll see you next week, Thursdays, noon and 7 p.m. I'm Jay Lamb, the planetarium producer and technical manager at the Louisiana Art and Science Museum and the Irene W. Pennington Planetarium. Have an excellent rest of your evening. See you next week.